Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Big Chris Live, the live stream and then the podcast, which you can find everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, DeanBlundell.com, our podcast network host. And thanks to those who are tuning into our live stream here. By the way, Dean Blundell from that very same website is here, part of this panel tonight, because he is a big Oak Island fan. Going to introduce the rest of the panel in just a few seconds. Thank you again for your subscriptions. If you have a chance to leave us a rating in the Apple Podcasts, we've had a few great ones lately. All 5 stars, I'm happy to say, but I'll take a 3 or a 2, even if you feel that way. By all means, just love the feedback, but so far so good. And also, April, just as a quick brag, humble brag, best listened to month yet on the podcast for audio listeners, and also for video. We had our most viewed episode as well, over 3,500 views on that video. Yes. All right, everyone. Dean Blundell is here, but also in the upper right-hand corner, Bob. Hi, Bob.
Hey, guys.
Bob is...
I'm probably going to forget that I'm on mute a lot today.
It's okay. No, you don't have to mute yourself. Keep it loose, baby. Bob is... the reason I know Bob is he is the very first person to call into Big 101 after we launched our morning show. At 5:32 a.m. on August the 23rd, 2016, I heard Bob's voice. He has followed the show since then. He follows the podcast, and he also loves Oak Island, so he's here. Hello, Bob.
Hello, everyone.
That's it, eh? That's all you got to say? Jeez, you talk my fucking ear off every morning. I'm like, man, I got a 3-minute Steve Miller song, Bob. What do you want to talk about? And you talk for 9 minutes, man. Now
you got other guests. I don't want to take all the airtime.
All right, fair enough. And in the upper left-hand corner, a longtime friend and collaborator, Kent Stewart, retired major of the Canadian Forces, now working for Calian Group in Ottawa. And just a history buff. There is always, when I have a question about something, military history or otherwise, I always know that I can go to you, my friend.
My pleasure, sir.
Also, if you scroll back in our episodes, episode 3 of this podcast was on November the 10th. It was titled My Favorite Veteran, because Kent is my favorite veteran. So thank you again for your service. We opened up the podcast with a picture of the Oak Island map, which I had on my wall as a 6th grader, and it was just sort of a perfect storm of things. I was given an assignment in 6th grade to study Oak Island. It was a class project and the mystery surrounding it, but I was also at the time reading Treasure Island, reading Kidnapped, as many young 11, 12-year-old boys did at the time. I don't know, do they still read those books? But I hope they do. And it's probably one of the only times I ever enjoyed school. And I had that map up on my wall. My dad took me to Nova Scotia some years later in 8th grade to visit Oak Island. I looked down one of those tube things. There was nothing going on at the time. I thought it was a shame. There was some infighting over the property, but no digging was taking place. It was a bit underwhelming, but I've always followed this, and I'm great to have you guys on the podcast to talk about Oak Island. The season finale of the TV series, The Curse of Oak Island, wrapped up last week. I hope we're all up to date, are we?
Yeah, oh yeah. Big time.
Yeah, I figured we were. So let's start. When did you first discover Oak Island? That's my origin story. We'll start with you, Dean.
Geez, it's got to be the first time they stuffed a diver down one of those holes, which scared the crap out of me. I was like, that is insane. That's all I could think of. And I remember stumbling across the show, and I see these 2 old dudes, and they're standing in front of this hole, and they're dropping this diver down. I'm like, hold it. Because I'm like deathly afraid of water, especially deep water, and I can't see it. It's just fear of the unknown. And I was just shook by the fact that they were just looking for treasure down this hole. And I didn't know anything about it. Like, unlike you, I didn't study it when I was in the 6th grade. I didn't look at any source material. I didn't realize that Oak Island had the history that it had. But always intrigued by the Freemasons, the Knights Templar. And so when they started to kind of wrap that up and Gary found the Bobby Dazzler cross, the Templar cross, I was absolutely, and they checked the origin of it, where they did the, I think it's called blaze testing, where they tested it and they realized where it came from, the era that it came from, which was, I believe, like 1400s, 1500s in that time frame, 15th, 16th century. And I was hooked. I was hooked because I love the history behind it. And then, to think of the history that it's changing as we're uncovering new things and changing timelines about the first settlers. And, they're getting into the Samuel Ball estate and realizing a lot about him. And, it's uncovering parts of Canada. And that's what I love about it. And honest to God, if you want to brass tacks it, why I love it, my dream is to be a 12-year-old boy for the rest of my fucking life. And these guys get to do it. They get to dig in the dirt every single day and find shit that no one's seen for literally hundreds and hundreds of years. It's just a terrific show.
Yeah, I agree with wanting to be 12 years old forever. You're doing a good job, though, with the podcast network, by the way. That merger the other day was big news.
Yeah, it was good. We didn't have to dig much for that. But it was... we love it, man. And it's great because podcasting is so niche, right? Like I can literally get excited to get on a podcast tonight, which is work for me, but it's not because we're talking to someone who's given his life and service to the country, who loves the whole thing. I'm talking to you, and I know how much you love it. I got to meet Bob, who just looks stoked. Look at him. He's drinking an orange drink, it looks like. It could be Fanta. There you go. There you are.
Nice.
And when do we get to do this with listeners? It's the best.
Yeah. It's great to go deep on this topic because I've been waiting to do this forever. And I was like, okay, let's just wait till the season finale. Let's see where we have the latest information we could possibly have.
I wanted to do it too, but I always thought it was too nerdy to do a whole podcast about looking for treasure, right?
My wife questions it. Don't worry. There's still people questioning why we're doing this. Don't worry. Melanie,
and morning show co-host.
Yeah, Melanie Martin this morning was like, Bob called in and said, "Hey, so 9:00 tonight?" And Melanie's like, "You're having fucking Bob on to talk about Oak Island?" I'm like, "Well, yes, I am."
Yeah.
So
yeah,
fucking
because
what?
when we find people as weird as us, we hang on to them. We're like, "Dude, you gotta come on the show. We're all weird together."
Yeah, exactly. Weirdo Roundtable. All right, Bob, so over to you. Oak Island, how did you discover it?
I was a big fan of the History Channel and just saw a promo. I thought, well, what's this? And I've been a viewer since episode 1.
Okay, so both you guys discovered it through the TV series.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And Kent, what about you? Where was your first Oak Island experience? Does it go as deep as mine?
Put your helmets on. So, like you, I learned about Oak Island, and like the Laginas, I read that
the Reader's Digest.
The Reader's Digest version when I was in school. And I was, again, one of those, like you, I loved to read. I loved all that intrigue. And at that time, it was like one of those things I would love to go to Nova Scotia. I would love to see this place, just try to drink it in. It wasn't until I was my first couple of years as a young officer in the military. I was in Gagetown, New Brunswick. And there's a fellow by the name of General Amy. He's a World War II veteran. He was a general officer or made it to the rank of general during the war. Fought Normandy all the way through to the end. And he grew up in Chester, Mahone Bay. So one of the first tasks I had as a junior officer was to be his aide de camp. So he's retired and he does things, as a retired general officer does, and comes and spends time with the troops and does all that. So I had to drive to Mahone Bay from Gagetown, a good long jaunt, and pick up General Amy and bring him back to Gagetown. So I drove down. I've never met General Amy, but when I'm getting there, I'm going, this is close to Oak Island. This is crazy. So the whole way back from picking him up and driving him back to the base in Gagetown, which is about a 6-hour drive, all we talked about was his youth growing up in Mahone Bay and talking about all the things, Oak Island, that he remembered, and the things that were happening through his childhood all the way through to coming home. And then, of course, later on when, some of the big digs started to take place on the island with Blankenship and the other fellow there that they wanted to put the great big honking tubes down. And they were the first ones with the whole, what was it? Oil, from the train cars, the
caissons.
Oh yeah, the giant
really
caissons, right?
From the train cars.
Right.
So anyhow, I got all of his stories from his youth, but there was a mixture of everything from Captain Kidd to Vikings to you name it. It was
So that was when I was a kid. It was all about pirates, and I thought it was. I'm wearing my pirate shirt tonight. You know, I mean, that's how I got hooked. But it's clearly, and we'll get into this as we talk more about what's going on currently with Oak Island. But it's looking like pirates maybe not really part of the thing. But that was the fantasy. Was it was pirate treasure, Captain Kidd's treasure, or Viking treasure? But yeah, not the case.
Yeah, General Amy often said, he goes, pirates doesn't make sense because he goes, they're just like soldiers. They talk, and these stories would spread, and you could never. It's like, you know, you'd have to kill the whole crew to keep it a secret, because they're either going to find a way to come back to dig it up themselves because they were there as part of the crew. So General Amy wasn't a big believer in pirates either. He said it was always something. He said it was probably something from the Revolutionary War. That's what he believed.
That's one of the theories that's floating around out there.
But I, again, when you're dealing with soldiers, sailors, people talk, people tell tales, people tell their families. They pass things on to their kids to say, guess what I did when I was in the war? And those stories, they perpetuate through time. And
General, can I just ask you a question? If you're saying soldiers can't be trusted, can we trust you in this podcast?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good.
I will spit a tale so deep.
Oh, good.
Well, you know what? That's the thing. We'll get into the specifics of what we've gotten up to date with, I guess, in a moment. But like, there's a new road that they've discovered in the latest season, which dates back to the 1400s. I mean, that's way before anyone thought that there was any activity or anything happening on that island. This roadway looks like it was a pier, looks like they were offloading something huge with ox shoes, so they had actual beasts of burden to haul stuff. I mean, this could be...
Why would you need a road?
Why else would you need
a road to sustain the weight?
But the road would not have been built overnight in the cover of night. I mean, and they had campfires, which means they were working 24/7 on it. But they couldn't. They would have taken what, months?
Well, they
years.
My theory is, that my understanding is if I'm not mistaken, Kent, and Bob, it's been happening and did happen for years. Is that, you know, some of the spikes specifically, and if you haven't watched the show this year, as you pointed out, they uncovered this road in a swamp, a man-made swamp that's a perfect triangle. And the road really kind of runs along through it. I believe it was like 600 meters or 600 feet, and everything was graded perfectly. The road that was put down was cobbled with different pieces of rock that were perfect sizes. There was cribbing under parts of the road as well, and that was literally. And you know, as someone who loves history, if you've ever been to Dublin and you realize how young Canada is. You know, it's not that old when you think about it, but it's life-changing and history-changing in the country. When you think about, that would have been probably the first cobble road ever put in the country, right?
Yeah.
And they uncover this road and the engineering that went behind it. And their theory is, and I like this theory, and I'd love to know what you guys think, is that it took several years for them to prep that area, for them to get it to the point where they could do the work, where they could lower what they needed to lower into it, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant or whether it's Shakespeare's great work, whatever it is, billions in silver and gold, Bobby Dazzlers, what have you. Mm-hmm. But these things, it required that kind of time, which I think is really incredible when you think it just speaks to that kind of treasure and how important that was and what must still be down there.
Yeah, there's no way. I don't think that anybody's gotten to it. I mean, I'd like to think. I mean, there's some conjecture over that. And for those who are unfamiliar with this and who are just playing along for the first 14 minutes of this podcast and being like, all right, what's this Oak Island thing all about? I'll quickly just run down the sort of history, in that it was in the 1800s that they found a shaft. Oh, sorry, they found I'm pushing all the wrong buttons here. There's the picture of the shaft right there, which went down several ways with different layers of all sorts of stuff. And then they found a stone at 90 feet, which had a weird inscription on it, which I believe, there it is right there. That's a picture. That's a replica of the stone, because that's another mystery. They don't know where the stone is. but the translation they think they had said that something like 40 million pounds is 90 feet below, or something to that kind of translation. Like it indicated.
Quick question. Did they not find the stone underneath like an old library?
No, they proved it wrong. They proved that wasn't it.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. I want to know where the stone is because, you talk about the secrecy or how there's no evidence of them even building a road or any oral history of anything happening on the island. Well, where did the stone go? Like, is there a modern day cover up? I mean, that's taking things a little far, but that for me, I wonder if there's still an organization that does not want that treasure found. Is that too far to go?
I think the stone is one of those. I think it's part of the myth. I don't believe that there was a stone, to be honest.
Really?
I think that was part of the marketing, if you will, to keep people interested and to invest in the early groups that were digging there. They thought there was something there, but to keep people interested, we had to come up with something. But why would you put a stone if you're the depositor? Why would you need anything to indicate how much is down there?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
You only worked for about 7 years putting it there, and you're going to leave a stone going, here it is.
yeah, and we'll have a whole manuscript with all the expenditures and everything, a ledger, if you will. That's what it was. It's going to lay it all out for you. Here's how much you can spend.
Yeah.
But this giant,
it's just like an ATM receipt.
Yeah, it's an ATM receipt, Bob. Yeah. But this shaft that was down there, they ended up, after getting down there, you can see in the diagram on the screen for those who are watching that there are flood tunnels that were attached to it. And then here's where the flood tunnels are allegedly coming from. This has been investigated by the TV series as well, that there are flood tunnels that come out from the ocean in certain types of drains. And then they flooded the shaft, and the treasure hunters were not able to get down deep enough. They dug the whole island is a pincushion by now because it's been over 200 years of people digging shafts, trying to get in, get down, get here, get there, which has also made the investigation pretty difficult on the behalf of the guys who were doing the TV show, because how do you know what you're pulling up right now? We found a shaft. Well, from when in the last 200 years? So that creates a lot of, there's the storytelling conjecture or the storytelling mistruths, whether it's the 90-foot stone or other stories that have been told about the history of Oak Island. But then there's also just being able to figure out what's what underground, which I think is part of the mystery unto itself.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. It's weird because, you every week you watch and every week you get excited because they're uncovering something, and I feel like it's part of as Kent was saying, there's a bit of a sales job with the TV show too, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I do love it, but every time the voice guy cuts in and goes, is this where the treasure actually is? That happens 25 times a show. Right?
Yeah.
So, and they'll pull up like a piece of leather from a 400-year-old boot, and we'll all get excited.
Yeah. But we're getting excited over like a bit of leather from a boot, a buckle, a button, things like that. But, these are significant in terms of the overall question that I think a lot of us come back to is, who the hell was this? I mean, sure, we want to see the treasure. We want to know the treasure. But the other thing that's stringing me along, at least, is who was it? Does anyone want to kick off our roundtable on conspiracies or theories as to who it was?
I think Bob does.
Yeah, Bob, you've been quiet over there. What do you think?
Well, no, I was going to say that I may not want to say stuff because I might look as foolish as some of the guests they've had with their theories on the show.
Yeah, there's been some good ones.
Just look up at the stars and line up these things, and it's exactly precise. Yeah,
the astrology ones are such a stretch for me too. Yeah, I hear you, man.
Right down to the micron.
I'm happy to start if you want. I could volunteer.
All right,
please go ahead.
Okay. So we all know the Vikings came to North America in, around 1000 AD.
Yeah.
And Lonsa Meadows is there. It's proof positive. But if, we really have to understand how these people worked, and they were avid travelers, and they would have not have stopped just there. They would have kept going. Mm-hmm. And I'm convinced that they traveled down as far as Martha's Vineyard, the whole idea of Vinland in their saga. So I'm a firm believer that because of their technology that they had, and they were voracious traders and voracious travelers, they probably went further than lots of meadows and further down the Atlantic coast. Which brings me to the next piece, and I'm just going to try to do this in quick little bits. When the Vikings were being Christianized, to use that term, or Catholicism was starting to reach them. They had friars and religious people that would travel with them and go to their homesteads where they were, where they're all set up. And these are the people, because they could read and write, they would actually start writing down the sagas of the Vikings. And of particular interest to these people is where they say they've been, and trying to trace, they've been here, they talk about traveling here and finding these things. And to these early friars and these the Catholics who were writing all this stuff down, all that information goes back where? The Vatican. All that information is being sent back to the center of Catholicism at the time. And then as you get closer into, the 12, the 1300s, as we start to see the appearance of the Templars were the educated. They were the most of the senior people. They were chosen from very wealthy families, and they could also read, they could write. But this is the beginnings of the modern day engineers. And so who has access now to all of the information that's resident in the Vatican? They do. And they are just drinking it up, and they're reading all these things about where people have traveled. And these Vikings, of course, have got these amazing ships. And early Templars, they were all over the Mediterranean. They were not only soldiers, but they were great sailors as well. Their technology to build ships to travel the Mediterranean, and they traveled from the Mediterranean into the North Atlantic, into the North Sea, to Great Britain, et cetera, et cetera. So these people knew how to sail. And I am a firm believer that the information that they've read about in the Vatican, in the archives there, of all these people writing about the sagas, and it's not just Vikings either, there's Germanic people, and et cetera, but this information is now resident there, and the people who can read and write, they're just drinking it in. So as the Templars become more and more powerful, and they become the holders of such huge amounts of wealth, which is, and again, we were talking earlier, it's never been found or never been uncovered, and it had to have gone somewhere. And so this all starts to, as you watch the Templars moving to the east of Europe, as it's, into Portugal and then into Scotland, and then you bring in the Sinclair theory of Nova Scotia. And here's a fellow with Templar roots, Templar connections. It's the Rosalind Chapel story, all of these things. And he now takes everything, takes it on a voyage, and gets to Nova Scotia. Now you get into the Mi'kmaq people, the indigenous people of this area, who now have their deity. The early renditions of Glooscap looks exactly like a what? A Templar knight.
Interesting.
All with the deal. And when they talk about the Mi'kmaq oral history, they talk about Glooscap being white-skinned, being, bearded, and the Mi'kmaq flags that they use now, their identifier flag is a mirror image of a Templar battle flag.
Interesting.
So these connections are incredibly, it's too good to be true. And although a lot of historians will poo-poo it, saying no, how do you get these ideas? How do you have this oral history if it's not based upon something that they've seen?
I like, Kent, how you've thought about how did the Templars know where Nova Scotia was, or where North America was, because some of these roads are built in the 1400s that we were talking about earlier, and so they had to be here before Europeans came, right?
The Templars built castles during the Crusade.
Yeah.
We're talking about
engineers,
huge castles, which also had, they built early roads through the Middle East to. I mean, even where I was in Syria, the ford across the Jordan River, there were two forts on both sides, and they built a road through the ford so they could keep using it to go back and forth across the ford instead of getting stuck in the mud. So these people had the technology to build this stuff, and they were very, very smart. So I just think that the connection with the information that's resident at the Vatican, it's too good to be true that all of the educated people who are in and out of there, they've got this information. They know there's another landmass out there somewhere, and where do we take all of our wealth before it's reclaimed?
Yeah, because it wasn't safe anywhere in Europe or in the UK, because they were marked at that time too as well. That's interesting, Ken.
Sorry,
I was going to say that's also everyone's favorite theory too. I think to go to is to who done it is the Templars, but that's a way more. I love the description, and I love how you sort of presented it there.
Well, the Templar theory, and I'm going to temper it by saying by this time you now have the last remnants of what Templars were. So you figure the end of the Viking era was 1066. We're talking about the Battle of Hastings. It's William the Conqueror. That's the end of the Viking regime. That's when everything stops, really, for the Viking people. But then you're starting to have people become more educated. They start to read and write. It's not just, there's a lot of Latin, of course, but there's that thing. So it's the way Catholicism is moving through Europe and Northern Europe at the time, and converting people is important to the story of how things are moving. And Catholicism also, I hate to say it, but it did bring us a lot more education, because people had to learn how to read the Bible, et cetera, et cetera. So you had people starting to read and write. So it's important to know that piece.
Yeah, it's more so Catholicism the later years that I have a problem with.
Well, I'm sure it was all over the place from the time beginning.
Well, that's true, yeah.
But it's interesting how, when we start talking about the occupation of Nova Scotia, this idea of Glooscap and...
That's cool. I'd never heard that before. That's wild.
Mi'kmaq oral history is fascinating. And so this is the piece that I think that historians are afraid to tread upon for some reason, but there's a lot of connections here with the Mi'kmaq people. And because it's oral history for the most part, it's either been forgotten or forgotten is really the big part of it. So it's hard to believe that something over at Oak Island, having to build all these things, would take years and years, and not to mention the amount of people it would take to build what they've done there.
And the dedication to a cause, or to a united cause, or a united creed that would compel you to stay quiet about it. That's the other thing. Right, yeah.
Correct. So how do you hide all these people? How do you feed them? How do you hide, this is the one thing that they haven't found on Oak Island, is like the midden piles, like these, where's the garbage heaps?
Yeah.
Did it all just go back into the ocean? I mean, you can't hide hundreds of people doing all this work. How do you do that?
Kent's going with Templars. So,
I wanted to temper that, saying this is what the Templars sort of, they're being killed off.
They seem the most, it seems like the right place, right time, the right ability as well, because again, I wanted it to be pirates when I was a kid. But now after seeing this, I'm like, pirates aren't fucking smart enough to do all that. The amount of engineering that it would take to build a money pit like that, with booby traps coming in from the ocean, to build that road, there's no way pirates could have done that whatsoever.
Not to mention how to use cocoa or a coconut fiber to actually, filter out the sand that's coming through those box drains.
Yeah, the drains.
That's ingenious.
Yeah.
So you had to have had some idea of what coconut fiber was.
Yeah.
And how would you know that?
Yeah. Anyone else want to rebut that, or have any other inputs on who done it? Because I think Kent, you really laid it down, man.
Yeah, did he ever? Totally, eh?
Yeah.
And you know what, the crazy part about what Ken is, and I don't think it's crazy at all, but that's a whole other story arc when you think about the Viking aspect, the recorded sagas, and how they went back to try and figure out exactly how the world had been conquered before, hundreds of years before other people did, right? That's what the Catholics did. They went and scooped information from people back then. So that's amazing. I mean, I hadn't quite put that together, but it also would describe the surgical precision in the context of the time with which they were able to, know when to go over from wherever they came from. Shipping lanes, not that we have shipping lanes back then, but like, seasonal stuff when it comes to being able to make your way over there. And then if you think about that, then the other parts of the story kind of make sense too, right? In my mind, which is if they were at this for 7 years, they knew what they were going to build. Like, who just shows up with coconut fiber to a dig? Like, this thing was planned, and planned so well. And in the again context of the time, to be able to think about using coconut fiber to be able to silt those box drains in a time when probably no one had thought that far ahead of a use for coconut fiber other than what they were doing. So I completely not just buy what Kent's saying. I think that's incredibly plausible. Where the Templar story sort of takes a turn for me is all the shit that they found on Samuel Ball's property this year, specifically.
That's been big.
The officer's button, right? The British officer's button. And there's such a massive hole there now, because if we go from Vikings to Templars, and which is incredibly plausible if you consider what they say is actually buried there, and then just going through the parlance of that conversation, that it makes less sense than that they're finding all this shit on the Ball property. To think about, okay, if the Templars knew about it, and this is now 100 or maybe 300 years after the fact that Samuel L. Ball is there, and he might have met with an officer in his house. We don't know. We know they found a button there. That button, that one silly button, turned this story almost upside down in one sense, because I don't know how we go from Templars to British officers, in the 1700s.
Well,
that's where I'm a little messed in the story.
And Samuel Ball has always been kind of there lurking, over the whole story in itself. And for those again who are playing catch up or just playing along with our fantasy of Oak Island here tonight on the show, Samuel Ball has a really interesting backstory in that he was an American slave who escaped America or was freed, but became part of the British Empire. He decided to be a loyalist. And so that obviously the American Revolution, he's like, no, I'm with the Brits. Peace. And he went north to Canada. And for his loyalty, the British gave him some land in Nova Scotia on Oak Island. But then this is where he became one of the wealthiest people in all of Nova Scotia. And he was a cabbage farmer. And everyone's like, hang on a second. How did he get so rich? Is cabbage, I guess cabbage was bigger back then. I know cabbage isn't as hot these days.
We have to temper this with some other information. So, yes, he was a slave, but he was made a free man because of the Revolution.
Right.
And he was actually given a pension by the British government. And so in the census material for the time, he's actually named as the governor of Oak Island. And so he was actually given a stipend to look after the island. Now I am one of those people that, because of what was happening in North America during the later part of the 1700s, so you had lots of wars, the big one being the Revolution that kind of set the stage for Nova Scotia being British North America. So you had a lot of movement up and down that coastline. And Mahone Bay by that time, like for the Revolution, was well known by the British. They had traveled up and down there to attack Louisbourg in the 1740s, and they had done it again in the 1750s. And the fall of Louisbourg in 1758. I mean, they knew the coastline well. So he was wealthy. Yes, I'm not so sure he found the treasure, because I think it was moved before he actually got there, personally. But so there's more to the story about the Templars and the Sinclair family, and and everything else. So we've talked about the fella up in New Ross it gives them all the information about the ironwork.
Oh, Carmen Legg. He's my favorite. And hey, he's the most Nova Scotia guy.
How's it going?
I used to buy the builds the boat. I used to buy the sails.
What's going on today? How's it going?
Oh,
Are
hey,
you
boys.
aware that New Ross has a foundation of a castle there?
No.
There. So this is another part of the Sinclair story. And the Templars, the later Templars, is that they moved everything up the Gold River up to New Ross, and they built the foundation of this settlement is still there. So one of the early episodes, they went to New Ross and checked it out, but it had a well and everything else there, but they didn't really develop that story too much. But
yeah.
Anyway, I think we had to be careful with Samuel Ball, because he was getting a pension from the British government. He was the keeper of the island, so to speak. And
okay. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting portion too. Man. Yeah, I mean, he was certainly, related to some higher up powers in the British establishment, right? And
no argument.
So to have a naval officer's gold gilded button, still in the foundation of his old home on Oak Island, maybe isn't that hard, because he was probably doing business with them more often than we knew.
Correct. Not to mention, Mahone Bay would be safe harbor in a storm. I mean, you're leaving Halifax or you're approaching Halifax. You're not going to make it. There's a storm brewing up. Mahone Bay is a perfect spot to pull in for to get out of the storm. So the British Navy knew Mahone Bay quite well.
Yeah. Back to Carmen Legg for a second. He's probably one of my favorite characters on the show, only because half the time they need to have subtitles underneath when he's talking, because his accent is so thick. Oh, hey, boys. But who is your favorite cast member? Anyone? Bob?
Metal detection expert Gary Drayton.
Yeah. Him and his Bobby Dazzlers. I bet he nicknamed his penis Bobby Dazzler.
I don't know why they got to give us his title 10 times an episode. Like, just call him Gary. Hey, here's Gary and his metal detector.
Yeah. No. He's a metal detection expert, Bob.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
if it says it on, aware of that.
If it says it's on your business card, they have to say it in the script as well. Anything that's on your business card, that guy will read.
He has got some amazing kit, though. It's crazy.
Hey, can a quick question?
Yeah.
Gary's not my favorite. I think Rick is, but I just love his stoic nature.
Mm-hmm.
But back to Gary for a second. Do you when you watch him and he gets excited for something, and you see that beautiful piece of machinery in his hand? Has it made any of you do what I did, which is order a metal detector so you can go to the like an old loser?
No, I have not ordered a metal detector, but I did think about it.
Dude, it looks so fun. It looks incredible. Like, the guy's just wandering around with this thing and it makes a noise and you're like instantly hooked. It's like fishing, right? That's all it is. It's like fishing for really expensive shit, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Maybe there's a Rolex out there for you and you don't even know it. And all you got to do is get a $99 little Gary, what's his face thing. Like,
Gary Drayton special.
Yeah. That's all you need.
I'm gonna be the old guy at Rideau Acres going around the whole campground with my metal detector. Getting some top pocket finds here.
It explained it. It explained to me why so many old people love metal detecting, and I'm like, then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm old. I love metal detecting too.
It's a sign. Well, hey man, it's like you get your Carlsberg years and then your metal detecting years shortly thereafter. So, all right. So you're going with Gary Drayton. You're with Rick. You would say?
No, I'm a Rick guy. I watched him cry in the finale.
I know.
And he's such a big softy, and and you called him a dreamer when we were talking about him once, and I think he's just righteous. I think he's like. And listen, dude's got to be like 65, 70 years old. He's strapping on the fucking knee pads. He's getting in the mud. He's pulling pottery out of a swamp going, here you go. Here's another one. And he's just as excited as everybody else, but you can't tell. That's why I love him.
Yeah. No, he's my favorite too. Actually, my dad and Rick, every time we're watching it, my wife, she tries not to watch Oak Island, but sometimes she falls into the trap, right? And she'll just, every time he comes on the screen, she's like, oh my God, it's your dad. He'll be crying over something. And she's like, oh my God, it's your dad. Kent, what about you? Who's your fave?
I gotta go with the Billy the Excavator. He's my favorite dude. He's he's just there for the show. I mean, he knows how to run everything.
Oh yeah.
You want, no problem. I'll just scrape that a little bit here, a little bit there, and.
It could literally be 4,000 below zero, and he'd be in shorts too, right?
Yeah, he's a shorts guy.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that, Chris?
No, not at all. Nothing at all.
Shorts year round.
Yeah. Well, listen, like I find him to be just a again, you want to talk about thick East Coast accents, he's got one of those too. And he's just oddly misshapen as well. Like from his haircut to the top of his head to his body, he's just very, very
looks like SpongeBob SquarePants, dude.
Yes. Yeah, I knew I.
Go Blue Noser.
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I ask a question for the panel? I know it's your show. Hi, I'm Dean. Thanks, everybody. Hi, Dean. Welcome. I have a question, and I'll start with Kent because he referenced it earlier, how he thinks it's been moved. Do you think they're chasing after nothing? Do you think there's anything down there?
I think the bulk of it was moved. There might still be some remnants there, but I think the bulk of it was moved, and I think that's what the young lads found. But then there's the question of why would you fill it all back in again if you were trying to if you had already removed it? So there's that piece as well. So I think there's bits and pieces. I think whatever mechanism they had, they were able to get in. Take some out because that would make sense for a bank,
Yeah, so that's been my theory, is that it's been because of the amount of evidence and different timelines. Not all of it is people looking for the treasure. It doesn't quite all add up yet. I feel like it was some sort of rudimentary stash or bank that somebody, maybe the Templars, maybe someone else, could go to and make a deposit and store stuff or a withdrawal or whatever, right? And that there was maybe some sort of trick to getting through the booby traps, or maybe there was a back door or something that they could have gone into. Is that too crazy, or?
I don't think it's too crazy. The Templars had things like that in a lot of their tunneling systems in some of their castles.
Well, they were great tunnelers too. That's another piece of evidence, right?
And they were. So I would come back to, I think a lot of it was moved. Maybe not all of it, but I think there's some mechanism to get in and out of it, which of course has been lost to us in time. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was the cocoa fiber. It's an interesting. They haven't picked up on. I'm surprised they haven't talked about it. And again, but the Romans used cocoa fiber in the Mediterranean for building their roads and building other devices. The Templars used it in the Mediterranean to mix with their concrete to build their castles, and so it's a piece of material that was well known to engineers of the time. So it's interesting that it would show up in North America in a very interesting engineering marvel in my opinion. But anyway, to answer your question, Dean, it's like I would like to think there's still something there, and maybe there is still something quite significant. I just hope it hasn't been destroyed by the numerous digs, the numerous attempts. I mean, they're still bringing bits and pieces of things up. Like the leather binding is fascinating to me. If it is Templar, they would keep records. They would have books. They would have ledgers.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they find? I believe they found part of a ledger book or part of a binding of a
binding.
Ledger book.
Yeah, they think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that, if you think about where the treasure was, or where you think it might have been, then are you saying that they had some kind of system of levers and pulleys to be able to pull up this thing, take out what they wanted, and put back in what they wanted?
Absolutely.
That is fucking fascinating.
Like national treasure.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it.
Yeah, but they used Oak Island like a bank almost, which would explain why they put so much fucking work into it. It kind of would explain, the rock pilings and the cribbings, the old cribbings that they found this year too.
The fact that they had a forge built on the island.
Yeah. Well, I think several. That's what we're finding out. It wasn't just one forge, right? They had several forges built.
Yeah, I mean,
they would have to.
Yeah, what could you be building that you need several forges, oxes, ox shoes, a giant port, a cobblestone road, that all and let's we haven't even talked about the ship yet. I mean, there's a ship. I mean, we can all agree there's for sure a fucking ship buried in that swamp, right? Like,
Pretty sure.
yeah,
Yeah, there is, and it's not a man-made swamp. It's a natural feature.
Oh no, it's man-made.
yeah,
You missed the episode.
Well, the one episode they mentioned the sea levels come up a meter every 100 years or something. So as the sea level is going to come up, sediment's going to rise in the swamp. Right?
interesting. Mm-hmm.
Well,
does anyone here watch the spin-off Drilling Down?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you watched the most recent one where they talk about the upcoming season?
baby was crying. I was trying to watch it, but
Anyway, the handrail they find in the swamp, they say it may be a wash-in, like it may have come in from the ocean and settled in the swamp, and that's when they bring up Vikings again, because they say that may be from a Viking ship, but I don't think so. I think there's a ship in that swamp because it was a port. It used to be a port. That's why there's a roadway there.
So the
But
theory.
I don't think it was man-made. I think it was natural feature, and that's why different people over the years have used Oak Island for different purposes.
Okay, but what you're saying, Bob, is like, yes, there was an opening there where ships could come in, but then it was closed off.
Yeah, at one point in time, they needed a road across there, so
they created the block, and that's what created the swamp.
Yeah, because I mean, the one structure they found last year actually went right under the road.
That's right.
Under the man-made road.
Yeah.
So obviously that structure was there long before the swamp was. Or the new road, I should say.
But by closing it off, they created a man-made feature.
Yeah. Well,
but they never did say when that road was when it was closed off.
Right, but that used to be open water, is what we're saying. Like right at that point, where the eye is at the top of the triangle, that man-made rock eye. If you work your way back and all the stuff they're finding underneath the road, I think we all agree with what we're saying. We're just saying it differently. That that was open water at that point, and that's why when they uncovered that road and they found the cribbing and they realized that that road was probably to offload and to push things up the hill.
Yeah.
They were putting boats on that. They were parking boats right next to it, right? They were mooring boats there, so that had to have been open at some point.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
And you look at the timelines, the furthest in, so near the eye, where that road goes up and then cuts across, that they've now established. I would say that's probably one of the early roads from the lining on the side of what's now the one part of the swamp that would have been sort of part of the port or the dock.
Yeah.
And then as it filled in, if they did drop a ship in there or whatever the hell's in there, but as it filled in, they had to move the road. So that's what I'm talking about, years of work here that's been put into place. And then the extension of that wharf that goes, the road's over top of it now, but it keeps going out into the ocean. So as the tide comes and goes, you've got the ability to bring a ship closer, or you have to bring it further back. But that's why they needed that road to bring all the cargo onto the.
I just, that was a big disappointment that they weren't able to prove that there was a ship in that swamp this season. And I know they're going to, I in my heart of hearts know they're going to prove it probably next season or soon, because.
Don't you find, though, that sometimes when we say stuff like that about this show, like, I was really excited for the big dig this summer. All of a sudden, COVID hit. And you're excited to see if they find treasure every show. They don't find treasure. It kind of stopped. It has sort of stopped being about the treasure. For me, it has.
Yeah.
Like it's not about if they ever find a goblet or a crucifix of Jesus or 3 million pounds of silver. That's great. It's almost like a fucking bonus.
Yeah.
But the history that they're uncovering and the kind of work, the mental work that goes into trying to figure out the engineering as they're trying to explain it. And here's what a show like that does for guys like us, right? All of us have started watching, spin-off shows. We've started reading about it. We've started going back in history. Like I watched Curse of Oak Island with my computer in my hand to go back through certain dates to look up what did ox shoes look like Templar roads. How were they built? Now I'm going to, thanks to Kent, who's just destroyed the rest of my evening, I'm going to start reading about Viking influence in that area over the next, couple of days, because I get fascinated by this stuff, right? Like, it's the uncovering of the history, but as Kent said, it's also the engineering that went into this.
Yeah.
It's also, like they're finding pieces of glass. I'm fascinated by how stupid this is too.
Yeah.
Finding pieces of pottery all over the road. I'm like, what the fuck did these guys do before they left? Just throw their dishes on the ground and split?
Yeah.
Like that, to me, that those are questions that I have in my head that kind of fill the story in. And as we fill the story in and we find out more, I find that the treasure becomes less relevant.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's more so the artifacts and the story of the whole thing, uncovering, again, the whodunit that we've explored a ton here tonight.
Right.
But yeah, there's so many different threads that you can cling to, and none of them have to necessarily be the fact that there's a chest of silver or gold at the bottom of some shaft on the island, right? I think there's, like you say, Dean, there's a bigger picture. There's a much bigger sort of thing at play that if you look at it from a grander scheme of things, this is the best Canadian heritage moment that we could ever possibly have on our television
Without
screens.
question.
Yeah.
Without question, especially during a pandemic. Do you know how important Curse of Oak Island new episodes are during the pandemic?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea?
Dean, when I got home Wednesday morning and I couldn't download the latest episode, I was so upset.
Right? Yeah, you cling to these things.
Yeah.
It's a good thing there was another episode of Drilling Down to watch, or I would have just gone into withdrawal.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and you form relationships with these guys on the show too, right? Like, we talk about our favorite characters. Maybe one of my favorite characters on the show hasn't been on the show for years. It's Xena.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
and how important a role she plays in this season and in the last season. And this show has so many different characters, and Bob pointed it out earlier, that come in and out of this show. Like, at the start of the season, this lady she had like a protractor and a geometry set, and she was like, I've drawn all these lines. This is exactly where your treasure is. And you're like, oh, I'm going to get so excited now because the treasure. But so I find that I have to temper myself watching the show.
Yeah. Because
I never want to get my hopes up. And I watch it like it's a suspenseful show now too, right? Every time they're digging something up. And I don't know if it's the odds of them finding something that keeps me coming back. I know that the extreme interest I have in history keeps me coming back, right? But it's just such a well done program. The way that they keep you gilled and locked in every week to see if they're going to find this treasure. But like I said earlier, it's not about that. I'm happy with a piece of leather that was 500 years old that you didn't even look like a piece of leather. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Could it be somebody's false teeth?
Hey, everything on Oak Island is speculation until three people have the same idea, and then it's fact.
There we go.
It's like that trade weight. They all had speculation about it, but now it's all of a sudden a precious metals trade weight.
That's true, yeah.
Fact. It's a precious metals trade weight. It couldn't have been Samuel Ball weighing cabbage.
It could have been his snuff jar.
That's why the British Navy was there. They were ripping lines with Samuel Ball.
So we talk about these little bits and pieces that come up. You remember when they found the other little, it's the end of a swagger stick. It's the end of a drill can.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
the end of it was the end of a lipstick case. I mean, you never heard of it again. They completely just dropped I'd like to go back to the whole idea of how much work this is, how many people it would have taken to do the work, and the fact that many people, we have very little evidence on the island at all that these people were there.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me how well they either got rid of their garbage, and et cetera, et cetera. And even Samuel Ball's area. I mean, they're not finding a lot of refuse that would normally be in a sort of a farmer's yard. As such. So a lot of burning must have went on. But I just this is where I come back to the whole idea of it had to be an organization that kept its secrets very well, because there's absolutely no records of anybody being in Mahone Bay at that time frame ever. Even like I was saying to you earlier, Henry Hudson, when he had his first trips across the Atlantic, he went very close to that area before hitting the Verrazano Straits, and he could have gone in there and fixed the mast of his ship at one time. But at the end of the day, no one talks about it. Yeah. There's no written record at all.
Yeah.
Zero.
That's the first time that anyone really had heard of Oak Island for anything notable, was the discovery of the Money Pit originally and that first shaft that they dug. And other than that, there's no real history to the place. It's pretty unnotable. You're right, Kent. And guys, we got to wrap this up. It's almost been an hour, and trust me, I could talk Oak Island forever.
Hey, listen, I know it's time to wrap up because Bob now has his cat in his lap.
It's nighttime what's your cat's name, Bob?
This is my 25-pound cat, Finnegan.
All right, Finnegan.
Yeah.
It's a big ass cat.
Boy.
Could it be a cat, or is that?
Could it be? Could it be a cat? Oh, lastly, before we go, can we all agree Jack Begley is the most fucking annoying character on the show, though?
Yes. All I want to say every time is, shut up, Jack. Shut up. Shut the fuck up, Jack.
Poor Jack Begley.
Hey? No. Yeah, you feel bad for him?
All he's ever done is dig on the sifting table and go, wow, wow. And there you are, ripping him a new one. And he's probably making $250,000 a year. So
he's an executive producer. You see his name in the credits. He's executive producer. He's probably making a ton.
Oh, stepfather's money.
Millions. That's the biggest show on cable television.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you think we're nerding out and we don't want to? And that's the crazy part too. Like I love talking about Oak Island with anybody that'll listen to me. And generally speaking, the only people that watch it are not my age. Yeah. So it's a little bit weird, but at the same time, it's such a big show, but nobody talks about it because they're like, I don't watch shows like that. And you're like, I love that show. I fucking love that show.
Smart guys. I mean, they've got A&E and history and all those. I mean, they're pumping money into this. How do you get all those big? I mean, Irving, for crying out loud, and those big tube slammer, slab and tomb down there.
Yeah.
That piece of kit is worth Brazilian dollars.
The show's a cash cow now, so
plus
they're investing.
That was what I thought this year when they had the pandemic. I'm like, all they're gonna do is just look through shit, and they did that's all they did is sift through stuff and probably make $110 million. Like, yeah. They don't. That's the other thing. If I'm those guys, I'm just gonna keep digging for another 20 years and just kind of hope to find something. Like the motivation for these guys is gone. But that's why I love the show so much, right?
Yeah.
They're getting rich, and they were rich before they did it, and they're still emotional about uncovering the history that they're uncovering. It's really cool.
Yeah. And to even see the buildings on the island, how it started with this little tiny visitor center, and now they've got the museum, and they've got the war room, and they've got the this and the that. Like,
I mean, they're selling Marty's wine out of the gift shop.
Are they really? Do they really? Marty has his own.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I told you I'd spin a story.
Fuck yeah, you can't tell a
Chris,
story.
Can you turn on screen share for a second?
Screen share? Oh yeah. Fuck, you're a pain in the ass. Sure, Bob. Hang on.
Well, I have a question for you guys before we go.
Okay.
Hang on. Who can share?
Is it about what to start feeding your cat to make sure it
should be shareable now, Bob.
Okay, no, it's about the upcoming season, and I want to know what you guys think of this idea. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Holy moly!
Oh, is that the thing they want to do to dig down?
Yeah, they want to use a tunnel boring machine rather than remove like 190 feet of overburden, so they can just drill down at an angle and to 190 feet and go right across.
Bob, I'm seeing shades of an episode of Die Hard here. I'm not sure which one. I think it's the second movie.
Well, this is a screenshot from drilling down.
Okay. So they're building this for the island? This is something that they're going to do, or is this just like hey, we put this together, this is something we're thinking of doing?
I don't remember if it was Rick or Marty that came up with this suggestion, but this is one thing. Rather than spending all the money, removing all that overburden, just tunnel down, and because it removes its own waste, because they use conveyor belts and stuff, so they don't have to worry about all that. They just keep tunneling, If they miss it 5 feet, they turn around and they move over 5 feet. Like,
Can you imagine what that would do to any sort of historical documentation or artifact?
The Holy Grail.
Here's Shakespeare's manuscripts. Oh,
yeah, the Holy Grail got shredded. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I didn't think of that idea, but yeah.
Well,
the crown jewels of France are now, I don't know what they are now.
That was fascinating, though, Bob.
Hey, good. You know what? The good news is all that dirt that thing kicks on a conveyor belt will keep Jack Begley, that little fucker, busy for a long time.
All right, we'll end things on that note. Thank you so much for our panel tonight. And could it be Oak Island Roundtable, Dean Blundell from, DeanBlundell.com, our podcast network host here for the podcast, Kent Stewart, retired major of the Canadian Forces, and also Bob from Midland, Ontario, also known as Bargain Bob or Man in a Van Bob. We've had a few
historical penitang. Historical penitang.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, because someone posted on Facebook today that they found some cannonballs from the War of 1812.
Yeah, they would.
It's true. We do have a military base here, but where's your substantiating evidence saying that's what it is? Like,
it was a harbor during the War of 1812.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was.
All right. We'll do a whole other podcast where Ken tells us the history of the harbor of Penetang.
It's actually very interesting.
I had to do a paper in university on that.
Did you really? Oh, that's hilarious.
Oh, there's lots of history here, Chris.
Well, maybe now that I'm moving to Barrie in June, I'll come up and spend some more time up there. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
We got to do this again before the next season starts.
Yeah, maybe before the premiere of the next season, we'll have a reunitation and we'll spin more theories and see what else shakes out between then and now. I'm going to follow
and do me a favor, guys. Listen, I want everybody to get out there. I want everybody to get a metal detector. and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the beach this summer, all four of us. We're going to figure out a place and time.
Penetang.
And we're going to go up to Penetang. We're going to look for cannonballs.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back to Bob's house and feed his cat.
That sounds like a blast. All right, gents. Well, in the spirit of Oak Island, let's get after it.
All right.
Have a great night, everyone.